Welcome, tech enthusiasts, to Rated, the place where we play devil's advocate to learn about the limits of technology. This is a sometimes heated debate where we argue whether a given piece of technology, tech platform, or software tool is overrated or underrated. I'm Nicholas Hughes, CEO of EITR Technologies, and I'll be your host on this episode, in addition to arguing for the side of underrated. On the overrated side, we have our guest, Stephanie Pfeiffer. Stephanie, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, my name's Stephanie. I'm the CTO of EITR Technologies, and I am super excited to be here and argue with you. It's my favorite thing.
Super excited to lose.
I've never lost an argument. Just ask my husband.
All right, buckle up and prepare for a thrilling exchange of ideas. We go toe-to-toe on this episode of Rated. Our featured piece of technology for this episode is trunk-based development. To kick off the debate, each of us will have 1 minute or so to present our opening statement, highlighting the key points we'll be discussing throughout the debate. Remember, we're looking for well-reasoned arguments, unique perspectives, and of course, some spirited back and forth. Stephanie, as the overrated side, you'll begin with your opening statement. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Nicholas. I'm excited to teach you about why trunk-based development is, in fact, overrated. I just can't get behind a topic that leaves me open to so much potential damage. I'm not even sure there's much more to say that. When you think about CI/CD, when you think about feature requests, when you think about bug fixes, hot fixes, and I can go back and forth between a feature and a bug fix, hot fix, whatever you want to call it. But to eliminate a layer of protection by just going off of the trunk boggles my mind. It boggles my mind. So my argument is, why would you want to do that to my mind? But, I mean, when we look at common patterns for CI/CD that are, coming up everywhere, it just makes sense to have more layers than less layers. I'm not talking about, a Parfait's level of layers. We just want the regular number of layers. But leaving myself just at the trunk and a develop branch from a developer that goes away when I'm done, can't do it. Can't get there. Was that an argument? I think we can end the video now if you need. It's fine.
Well, Stephanie, you certainly had some terrible and wrong points there. But now it's my turn to present the underrated side, which is also known as the correct side. Trunk-based development is underrated. It doesn't get enough love. You have your main branch, you cut feature and bug fix branches off of it. You do your thing, you put in a merge request, PR, whatever you want to call it, right? And you merge it right back in. You cut tags off of main, everything's there in one branch. You don't have to worry about all of these long-lived branches out there that, are just terrible to have to deal with. You have a main branch and a develop branch, and those are your primary branches, and what work goes where do you cut the releases off of? I don't understand why we need all of that complexity in our lives. I'm a simple person. Just let me do simple things.
It's adorable how simple it is. Adorable.
All right. Well, we've heard the opening arguments, and it's clear we're in for an intense debate. But now it's time to dive deeper into the argument, challenging each other's perspectives, and examine the implications of trunk-based development.
Bum, bum, bum.
So, like I said, it's all about simplicity. You can use trunk-based development on literally any type of project. There's no project in which it's doesn't make sense. And that's not true for other strategies, right? Like, say you have a Git flow type setup and you've got a primary main and a primary develop, and you've got all these like complex rules that you're following in order to merge hotfixes into previous versions and everything like that. Like, it's just, it's a lot, and it doesn't make sense for some things, right? Like, say you've got a repository for infrastructure as code, right? Like, you got some Terraform in there. Like, you're really going to have a develop branch for that? It just cut tags off of it and deploy different versions of whatever IAC you have in there, and you can pin your production environment a certain version, go to a development environment and have some future version there. It's just it's way easier, and you can have it for those use cases, and you can also use it for like traditional development projects as well.
I mean, at the beginning of your statement, you said it was for all things. It made sense, which I've never seen anything in the universe that makes sense for every little, except for maybe chocolate. Nope, some people are allergic to chocolate. It doesn't make sense for them. So there's nothing in this universe that makes sense for everyone. And with trunk-based development, I'll agree with you. Smaller form of teams, smaller projects, sure. You can get away with it. You can get away with that. Like, I'm just going to make tags. But when you scale that, you're really just trading branches for tags. How many tags do I really want to take care of on my repo? And if I'm a production level product, how many tags I'm going to release? And I'm like, oh, wait, that one was busted. Don't use that one. It should have been in a branch. It never made it into a tag. It never made it into a release. Let's leave our tags for releases and leave our branches for development. And then have like this nice place where you could put them, or people could test together, like a develop branch. And then you like make sure your QA is happy with that. And your testers are like, this is legit. And then they push that into main, like a normal sort of flow for code. And then everybody's happy and secure. And the level of potential issues that come out of that, it's so much lower. And everyone's so much more relaxed right now just by walking through it. It's like so good.
I'm not relaxed. I'm
I know you got your arms crossed. I only see one hand. I'm relaxed.
It's just, I don't think that it increases the number of tags, first of all, right? Like, tags certainly should be for releases. But, I guess my main point is, time marches on, right? If say you have a 0.1 release, right? You're like, oh, somebody is running 0.1. We need a hot fix for that. Like, meanwhile, we're up at like version 3.0. Like, who freaking cares? Tell them to freaking upgrade, right? Like, move.
Not going to disagree with you there.
move on with life. So like leaving the opportunity in for, we're going to cut some feature branch off of this, or we're going to have a hot fix branch off of this. And then, we have to deconflict and merge all of those things in. Does this one have this patch? Where does this go? Where does this, pick up? It's just, it doesn't seem worthwhile, right? Like, the main branch of your repository should be, the best of the future, right? And if you cut frequent versions off of that, you aren't waiting 6 months or something like that between releases, and you have incremental changes, and you just keep moving on, and you incentivize and make it easy for people to upgrade, then you keep pushing on.
I mean, yeah, I think we can agree on the fact that, your main branch, that's your holy grail. Nobody should touch it. It should be touched only when it needs to change. So that's why I like having a develop branch in the middle, because my developers can make branches off of that, and it can act as my intermediary between the two. It's definitely a little bit more complicated, But for enterprise level projects where I've got several different things and maybe, tens, hundreds of people working on the same code base, can't risk something going into main and me having to cherry pick things off of main when I could, that could impact one of my actual deployments. So if I have something accidentally going to develop, I feel much better. Not great, but I feel much more protected for my deployments.
That if you have the right processes in place where people are actually doing proper code reviews and not just pencil whipping this stuff, and you have proper testing in place, you're doing test-driven development, you have good coverage for all of your code paths, there's no reason why you can't do all of this off of main and just properly gate things from being merged into it, right? Because like what you're talking about here is like, okay, well, we've got our development branch and bad processes. Like, yeah, sure, your development branch is going to be a mess, right? And then you have to clean it up, and you have to cut a release off of that, and then it's good and stable, right? But like if you have good processes, then your development branch is just another hop that becomes unnecessary.
I agree with you there. Like if your processes and the teams are following those processes, like you can definitely have that utopian setup. That's great. But your risk level is still going to be higher than if you get somebody in there and they, accidentally hit merge instead of approve, or something else happens that goes outside of that process. Then your barrier to having an issue hit your production server, assuming that you're using standard modern CI/CD practices, you could be looking at something that could bring down your system. So when you look at it holistically for all the things, no matter how good my processes are, there's still room for error. It's the same thing with security. You can only be as secure as you are, as long as you're trying.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're right. There's always the possibility for error, but I could tell you 5 different ways that we could mitigate the risks that you just brought up. It's a matter of identifying where those problems can occur and saying like, hey, this is going to be our barrier to that. Let's say that we need multiple approvals before something can be merged, right? At that point, multiple people have had eyes on it. They've all said that everything's good to go. And so if somebody does accidentally hit merge, it will be after the point at which those multiple approvals have already occurred, right? So that's one way that you can get around that. Another scenario is how things are deployed, right? If you want to deploy every time main changes, regardless of whether or not there's a tag cut off of it for a release, then yeah, you can absolutely do that. But it's only going to deploy into a development environment, right? Like there's no world in which a production environment should be pulling off of whatever the latest main is, right?
Yeah, we'll agree there. I was starting to worry that you weren't paranoid enough, but to hear you come around a little bit, I'm like, okay, he hasn't lost his mind.
Yeah, I'm not saying don't be paranoid, right? Don't have processes in place in order to make sure that the right things are happening. All I'm saying is that, we can have a simple setup that's easy to understand and, easy for folks to do the right things, as long as we have the proper guardrails in place in order for them to not screw things up, right?
Yeah, and I mean, the tools that are out there, like I use GitLab mostly, like they give you the ability to protect yourself, and they try their best to set their defaults to make sure that you don't do anything awfully stupid. But, there's still people out there that will do those things, and sometimes that guy's me. Definitely not perfect, but, from like an infrastructure as code perspective, I can definitely get behind a trunk-based development setup. Like they have, when you're working with Terraform, there's different levels of configuration management that are happening there, regardless of my code management structure. But when it comes to, analytics projects, front end projects, code heavy projects, like even the NPM and Maven, they provide support for Git flow and things that are going to assume that I've got those different layers and different types of branches to move them through my system. So I think that there's at least a large set of projects that benefit heavily off of having a develop branch, just from, not only protecting my main branch, but making sure that my features are going out in the right cadence and that I can update them appropriately. I feel like you glazed over there for a second.
I completely tuned out.
It was a great argument. Just put me right to sleep.
No, you started out and I was like, well, that's wrong. And I was just like, okay, I'm done. I'm not going to listen to her anymore.
I started out on your side.
All right. Well, I think that we're probably going to have to agree to disagree on this one, because, there's no world in which I'm going to introduce more complexity into my life. It's just not going to happen.
More safety.
No, you say that it's better for code heavy projects, and I've been involved in them, and I still don't understand why. I don't understand why anybody would need to do that.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to agree to disagree. I think we've been involved in different types of code bases, so without getting into the minutia, everyone would be so bored. So we can't do that.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of this fiery debate on Rated. Both of us have presented well-argued cases, passionately defended our positions on whether trunk-based development is overrated or underrated. We've heard some compelling points, mostly from my side.
Whatever. I knew you were going to say something like that. Stupid.
Now it's time to wrap up the discussion. Before we conclude, we have one last chance to share our final thoughts. Stephanie, any closing remarks on why you believe trunk-based development is overrated?
I knew we weren't going to be friends at the end of this. Just wasn't going to happen. You can't have both worlds. I'm telling you. That's all there is to it. I'm leaving it there.
We're just not friends anymore. That's your summary of your main point.
I'm gonna go cry now. I'm saying there's a world for both. I'm just saying there's no one right answer for everybody. Don't give up on develop branches. Someday you'll be in a complicated code setup and you'll actually appreciate having a develop branch.
And my final thoughts on why trunk-based development is underrated. It's because Stephanie is wrong. And I've been involved in large, complex code bases, and I don't think that there's any need for additional complexity brought in to the picture by having multiple primary branches, complicated hotfix layouts and things like that. I can't think of any reason why any of those would be so important that it would trump the simplicity of trunk-based development. So, Stephanie,
Nicholas,
former friend, thank you for joining me today, for your insightful arguments, and for providing our viewers with plenty of food for thought. Now it's up to you, our audience, to decide which side you agree with. Head on over to the comments section on our social media channels to cast your vote on whether you think trunk-based development is overrated or underrated. We'll reveal the results in our next episode, so stay tuned. We hope you enjoyed this spirited debate on Rated. Big thank you to Stephanie for joining me today. And to our viewers, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to catch the next thrilling installment of Rated. Until next time, keep exploring new tech and debate all the things.